All right, so we're back. I'm a cheater. I got a blue line printout, and
Brandon
Brandon
and
and
I
Sean.
light boxed ours. My light box is my window facing west right now.
Oh yeah, my light box was was just me turning off the lights in my room and tracing it off the screen.
Super high tech here.
That is
Um,
the way to go.
so the question right before we started recording was, are we going to allow ourselves to look at the inked image or not? What do we think?
I hadn't done it yet, but this is hella hard so far.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to just because I need to figure out what things are.
Right, her mecha especially. I'm not really clear about what's happening. So we talked
See,
about this.
I'm
This is
I'm
a
interested in seeing how everyone interprets this without that information,
okay.
because I think that's where, like, normally we're trying to pick apart the artist's style, but I think we have a unique opportunity to learn something more about ourselves and each other if we just like
I'm
I don't know. I
really
think it'll be a different conversation. So
sure. I
like
am very fascinated by it. What's
the
that?
mecha stuff, I think would be really interesting to see how everyone interprets that if we're not looking. So I vote for that, but y'all can do whatever you want.
What were we saying, Brandon?
Oh, I was just I was just complaining about his proportions. I was like, her head is gigantic.
So
It's
this
one
is
of those things that you don't really think about how weird he draws noses and mouths until you have to draw them yourself.
right. This is the animation argument I was half making while we were talking about the book. Is it seems to me that this is a very animation ready face in a early 80s Japanese sense.
So I would be fine looking at the images just because I'm kind of interested in trying to recreate some of his weird lines he does.
Okay.
But I'm not totally opposed to trying because yeah, some of it's just so not how I draw that I would
Right.
like to eat it and have it as part of my art anatomy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got you. That's what we're normally doing is like, oh, what is this person doing? How can I steal from it? Um, on this one, I don't know. I'm just interested in maybe because I'm thinking about tapping back into the imaginative part of myself. Like I want to exercise that a little bit.
Do you know the Hemingway quote about writing? I like to throw that around a lot. He said, first start with something true." I always think about that in relation to using reference.
Hmm.
Like the
Yeah,
idea
that
that
makes sense.
if you're going to go totally off the rails and draw out of your head, sometimes it's more grounding if you use reference to get like, this is an actual car, and then you draw your cartoon character in the next panel, and you're like, well, this is clearly real because the car is exactly what a car looks like.
Well, I'll do that sometimes too, because for me, like if I'm trying to achieve a more cartoony look, I will still do a reference and then put it away and whittle down from there a lot of the times, because that's the only way I can get to cartooning is start more realistic and subtract. Um, whereas I think a lot of people just have that inclination for like the icon right out the gate, the more iconic image. Uh, that's as close as I've ever gotten to starting with something real.
Oh, interesting. Because yeah, I feel like my go-to is very cartoony from the beginning. Sean, what is your style generally like? I don't know your work as well.
I have sort of two modes. I mean, most of the commercial illustration that I do, I mean, basically people hire me for different stuff. So, like, one client has almost exclusively done me for, or asked me to do what are basically uh, realistically proportioned ink drawings with flat color for them, and that's basically all they're interested in. Another client wants me to do fairly cartoony stuff, which is more of a go-to for me, and things that I can just pull out more easily is a sort of you know bouncy or cartoony style. But yeah, like I feel a little schizophrenic because as a freelancer, I'm almost always dictated by the client in that regard.
Certainly, yeah.
It's not a very
bizarre.
sexy answer.
No, it's. I mean, that requires more skill than just being like, I have a go-to thing that people hire me to do. I get
I
caught
wish-
up in commissions sometimes. Sorry, what were you saying?
No, I wish I had a go-to thing that was, I think that would be a mentally or emotionally more sound. Um, I like the contrast that Shiro gets with the real world feeling mecha and such with more abstracted and gestural figures. Although he loses some of that, I think, later when he starts pushing the realism of the physical proportions.
Yeah, he even complains, I think, in his art book about how his faces are so flat in relation to everything around them.
Right. Some artists, I think, you get a kind of uncanny valley aspect to it. I was thinking the other day about Eagle. I don't know if you ever read that, Brandon.
But the British children's stuff.
Oh no, it's called The Making of a Japanese American President.
Oh, I don't know that.
It was translated by Carl Gustav Horn for Viz in like 2000, 2001, something like that.
Okay.
Anyway, extremely cartoony features, and then occasionally they'll have like a sex scene or something, and it'll be super referenced with the cartoon.
Of course, I need to hire a model and bring them in to act this out, please.
And it's wildly distracting to see those bodies with the heads.
Oh, that sounds like a nightmare.
And I occasionally get at like a slight edge. Shiro navigates that really successfully, I think, for the most part. But like towards the end of Ghost in the Shell, when he's really, you can tell he just has a total command of anatomy, but he's still got the same designs. It sometimes feels a little like that to me.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's an interesting thing happening in a lot of Adam Warren's work too, because he's like a Kubert school guy that got really that drew fairly realistic, kind of these I don't know, rock and roll images early on, and then he discovered manga and kind of reinvented himself. But he still has that underlying, he would get critiqued a lot because he draws realistic lips. But I feel like it's more authentic of him coming from that and not, because I have a hard time not drawing nostrils on characters,
Right.
It's hard to learn what to leave out. That's something I'm playing with too. Like, do you know Bastien Vives?
Oh yeah, Bastien Vives.
Vives? Yeah, I don't know.
I have my own way of pronouncing things, and I'm sure none of them are right.
Yeah, same here.
I just got his book from Ablaze called A Sister. Do you know that one?
Yeah, he's been like one of my top dudes right now, and he leaves out so much. He'll just have a face with like no eyes.
It's kind of baffling because it's like, you're like, why the eyes?
But it works. It works so well. He does it so well, and that's something that I've really been like, man, if I could figure out how to keep the realism of what we're doing in Strange Death, but get the calligraphy and the openness, and he'll just leave entire lines out, and that's a problem I want to solve. Yeah, his book is. He has another one that they're coming out with in a couple of months called The Butchery.
Okay.
Have you ever seen his book? It's more of like a European manga called Last Man.
Oh yeah, that he does with is it Balak and another guy?
Yeah, so good. Such good stuff.
It's weird. I cannot gauge who does what on that book. It's really fascinating.
Are they sharing art duties?
Yeah, I think it's 3 artists on it.
Oh, really? I thought it was all him on art and then some writers.
Apparently, I've heard varying things about it that I can't really back up. But one person was telling me that they actually set like an egg timer, and they're like this is how long we have to ink this page, and then that'll ding and just hand it off to the next guy.
Wow. Yeah, it's really consistent. I associate it entirely with what I think of as his style.
He's one of those guys that seems to have several styles too. Like he'll kind of jump around a bit.
Yeah, I just saw him on Instagram. It's always like ink wash pictures of chicks with gigantic tits, like leading kids around. It's very. I thought I had the wrong artist for a second.
I love God. Europe is just like picking up the slack where like you'd think that would be such an American idea. And I love that Europe is just like, nope, we got it over here.
Yeah, you can't do that over here right now. It's too offensive.
Yeah, it's funny. I have a Italian artist who wants me to write a comic for him, and I was doing it about basically a science fiction version of a Native American culture. And I was just thinking, because I was thinking, if I'm gonna, and he keeps being like, let's release it in America first. And I don't know a polite way to tell him, like, I don't think I could get this passed if I pitched it over here.
I just can't do it.
Yeah, and it's like, it's done, I mean, I'm trying to do it sincerely, and I don't think it'll actually piss anyone off that reads it, but it's one of those things where it's just like, people, it's like people are not actually afraid themselves, they're afraid of the people who are afraid. It's like,
Oh yeah.
it's a weird backwards thing. A friend of mine compared it to Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, Sidney Poitier movie, where the parents are rude to their daughter and her boyfriend because they're worried, like the liberal parents are worried about how the conservative world will treat them, but in that instance, just the parents being horrible to them.
Right.
I feel like that's kind of how the American comic industry is acting sometimes.
Well, there's a documented sociological phenomenon where if you ask somebody to guess what other people will think about something, that they have a tendency to make judgments that reflect the idea that people are stupider than they actually are. This is a interesting overlap with the early Hollywood film industry and today's sort of crisis of culture, in that people would, used to get these movie review cards and they would ask people to review the film that they were seeing, but they would specifically ask them in terms that were implying that they were supposed to guess what other people's judgment would be.
Oh, interesting.
And people do a poorer job of guessing if you prime them for thinking that they're guessing about other people who are not them. And I think that the current cultural milieu owes something to that, where people try to guess what's insensitive. They try to guess what a sensitive person would react to.
That's very depressing. Yeah, and I think that's where it becomes really important, especially for artists, to make their own decisions and not worry like, who am I going to, because I think a lot of people want to be good people, and so they are timid, but I think it's needs to be more acceptable to make mistakes and kind of keep moving.
Oh yeah, I have students that will be like, oh, let me see your sketchbook. Well, there's some stuff in it that, they basically do like some girly drawings or something. And it's like, oh no, I can't show that to anyone. And it's like, man, not in here. Like, especially in your sketchbook, like your sketchbook is the place to just let loose and whatever, like they think it's like perverse thoughts. I mean, down here in Alabama, I think some of it's coming from the religious side of their upbringing rather than anything else. But it's like, if that's what comes out when you're just doodling, it's no fair for anyone to judge you on what's going on in your subconscious. Like, you finding out what's going on in your subconscious is healthy. And if you find something there that you think is wrong, then it's something you can deal with. But at least you found the damn thing.
Yeah, totally. And but it's really frustrating because then you see, like, I think how Robert Crumb has been treated is a really good example of like that. Like, I feel like if you break that apart, it's essentially people are mad that Crumb had thoughts that they didn't agree with. Not that it's not about what he did with those thoughts. It's just like, how dare you even have inappropriate thoughts, which is really scary if you start to get down to.
Oh yeah.
To the
I
reality
feel like
of
I've
person.
never seen much backlash against. He's always been someone where I'm like, how the hell is this guy the celebrated guy? But other people are looked down upon for whatever.
Well, get a Twitter account, Carson.
Okay.
Yeah, no, there's people that it's really frustrating seeing social media. One of the dumbest things about it is there's so many people that are like, oh, I really like this person, and then they'll say something horrible about Robert Crumb, or like it was really fashionable for a while for people to complain about Craig Thompson. And Craig's someone that I know, I know as a person, and he's just a better human than me. And so when I'd see people be like, this guy is horrible, I would just be like, you know nothing about anything.
Yeah.
What was their complaint?
He did a book called Habibi, which was criticized. Yeah, it's a fantastic book, and a lot of people can criticize kind of how like the sexual assault in it was done, and how the kind of Middle Eastern cultures were depicted, but it's just, I don't know.
It seems like a critique of who wrote the book, not a critique of the actual content.
Yeah, there's a bit of that too. It's very silly, and you know, I think it's one of those places where adults have to step in at a certain point and be like,
Right.
you know, you're not. It's not a good look to try to critique finished pieces of work as inappropriate to ever have made. You know, I think it's really ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a weird thing.
What in the world is going on with her suit here? Does she have? It's this laundry day, and there's. I'm having. I can't even decode it without looking at the finished image. I'm having some.
You're doing such a better job than me. I made a total mess of this whole arm here.
I've gone. What's that?
No, go for it.
I was saying I've gone full. I'm looking at his inked version just to figure out some of the.
Ah, okay.
She has this weird. I don't think it is, but it feels like a crystal around her neck.
Oh.
Oh, I wouldn't have guessed that at all.
Just like a chunk of something right at her, where like an Adam's apple would be.
I totally botched this sleeve though. I was getting a little wild.
Oh, that's good. The Bear Windsor Smith is getting into you.
Yeah.
She's inhabiting your page, dude.
Yeah.
Jumping right in.
Yeah. So you guys liked the new Barry Windsor Smith book?
I wouldn't say so.
I watched part of the video and I saw a lot of talking about, like you mentioned Frank Miller's influence a lot.
Yeah, in the car.
Yeah, I saw that in the car. Yeah, in the car chase.
Yeah, because I was kind of wary of it because I like Smith a lot, but I also feel like the excitement of him is almost like seeing him go from Conan to X-Men to Barry Windsor Smith storyteller, right, and like watching him evolve. And I'm almost less interested in seeing a fully evolved Barry Windsor Smith than the process.
Well, you get to see the whole process in the book. I mean, I think the part of what we were doing when we were looking at the book is decoding what parts might have been drawn at different times. There's a pretty big stylistic swing towards the end, especially, and then you can sort of follow it through the earlier segments and see where he patched things at a different era, let's say.
Okay.
So it's interesting. It's just so I mean, it's super gruesome, and you know, I'm saying this as somebody who's reading Fist of the North Star this week.
Sure, but Fist of the North Star is a different type. Like, it's not gruesome in a way where none of it feels real. It's like,
that's right. And the stuff with like child endangerment and stuff like that. I mean, you know, I got 2 young kids. It's hard for me to handle visual depictions of little kids being beaten by their fathers and stuff. I mean,
that is very. I would be wary of someone that was casually okay with that.
Right, and it puts the story in a different kind of. For me, it ramps up the need for something to be serious in a certain kind of way.
Sure.
When you make the stakes like that, it like raises the stakes of it. And yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting book, and it uses a lot of interesting genre tropes and sort of slaps them all together in a way that some people will find pretty satisfying, and I think it's an interesting book. It's several different genres mushed up together.
I think I'll read it.
Have you not read it yet, Brandon?
No, I was kind of wary of it, just for multiple reasons, but also part of it was just that it's like this gigantic book, and I have I just bought a Kelly Green book I haven't gotten to yet, and it's kind of been my.
That's
thing.
So good.
That's a good use of your time.
Yeah, totally. And I was like, when I finished Kelly Green, and I also, the other book I got really excited about is I got Milton Caniff's Mail Call.
Oh yeah, I would love to read that. Although,
really singular. What were you saying?
What's the quality of it? Is it that thing where they have really bad materials to work with, so you don't really get to appreciate the art, or are they doing a good job?
It's really nice, actually.
Okay.
It took me forever to find the thing. I actually was at a museum in Vegas, and they had a copy that was just display and not for sale. And then I came back to Portland, and my local store, Cosmic Monkey here, just had it on the shelf for the cover price.
Yeah, I'll take that one, thanks.
Yeah, it's really, really beautiful book. It's one of those things I just keep carrying around with me everywhere I go.
Yeah, I'm always hesitant with the reprints, you know, because of Strange Death. I'm always hesitant of the reprints of the old strips because I've seen too many of them where it's just like, I don't know, I know how different that looks from the actual art.
Yeah, and I'm probably a pretty cheap date with that stuff. Like it would have to be really bad to kind of for me to notice it.
Okay. The Kelly Green stuff is really well reproduced for the most part.
Yeah, it was weird because I knew it in color, so it's interesting that they reprint is all in black and white.
Oh, what?
Well, thank goodness they did.
I didn't know that. I've only seen the color editions that came out at the time.
Yeah, it's the new one's just like a hardcover that's all of the stuff.
Huh.
Yeah, I haven't read it yet, but I remember really liking how ridiculously trashy the original version I read was.
Well, I really appreciate how lavishly sexy his drawing is. I mean, he just really gets in there. Like a sensual perspective. I really liked the line wash combo.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful stuff, and so unlike. It's interesting, like talking about cartoony styles, because I think wasn't he doing Blondie and Dagwood comics beforehand?
Probably at the same time, yeah.
Bizarre. It's like unrecognizable as the same artist.
Yeah, he was doing those strips at the same time. He was doing 2 strips at once. Maintaining the Heart of Julia Jones and doing Blondie and Dagwood.
It's nuts.
Oh, Sean, you're like really going in on the hair with the darks, huh?
Yeah, gave her some highlights there that seem to be indicated in the.
Does she have? Does he color in hair like that? I feel like the hair was all linear.
Oh, did I push it too far?
I don't know. I mean,
I think it's pretty close actually.
Oh,
okay.
I've seen it. She's got some lighting effects. I don't think she always has it, but it looks like in the roughs anyway.
Yeah, I don't. That's one of the things I'm just interested in. Okay, I've just got these pencils in front of me, and I'm just gonna see what happens. What tools are everyone using? You're with the 100 again, Sean?
No, I thought that it would be inappropriate for this because he uses so little. Although I'm not copying his line, I don't know why I care. Because I'm not actually looking at the image. No, I'm using a writing nib. I think it says Chicago school system on it. I've got a bunch of these.
That's fun.
They were manufactured for the school system back when kids would have been, writing with a nib like this.
Interesting. So and Brennan, what have you got?
I've got I'm using Micron Pigma pens.
Okay, so you're going tech pen.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of I have a brush that I keep meaning to ink a comic with, but I usually just use it to fill in blacks, and I don't have any nib pens or anything. Anything that an adult would own. My friend Farrell Dalrymple uses a lot more kind of classic art tools, and I keep meaning to get him to kind of teach me some of the stuff.
Yeah, but that's part of that's such a part of your style, is that I think of like the line Claire stuff, the European clean line.
Oh yeah, the Tintin stuff's huge, but it's weird too because I mean, especially I don't think I've told you this, but getting into Strange Death of Alex Raymond kind of opened this weird door for me that I had this very simplistic view of comics history, which was very inaccurate, which is basically excluding most newspaper comics. And my impression now is that newspaper comics were basically where the high-end artists were going. Well, the Jewish guys that couldn't get work anywhere were doing superhero comics.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's interesting kind of in the history of comics now, it's almost like when you look back at early Superman or Batman, it just looks, you just assume that all comics were that crude back then, when its reality is just like the guys that were just better illustrators were just not making those comics.
Right.
And what I see in those old comics is what I thought Alex Raymond drew like because of the bad reproduction. Like if you take the bad reproduction that was showing up in the newspapers and then base your style around that, you get a lot of stuff that looks like the old bad golden age stuff in my mind. And that's why he was someone I ignored until I saw Dave's work on Glamour Puss, like reviving it to a state that you could actually see what it probably looked like. And I was like, holy crap, I need to look at this guy. Because it's a totally different look.
Certainly, yeah. Yeah, it was interesting. Sim went so hard in kind of the rivalry with those guys that I was unsure how much of it was theory and how much of it was something that seemed accurate. Like I remember that redraw that he did of the handshake between,
Yeah.
I think it's Kniff. Is that Kniff and Raymond?
Yeah, Kniff and Raymond, and then the guy, I can't remember his name now. He did all like the devices that. What's that guy's name?
Oh, right. I'm doing a book kind of based off his stuff right now, and you're talking about Rube Goldberg.
Yeah, Goldberg. He's the one behind Raymond. Yeah. And he's talking, like Dave's obsessing about how the fingers popping out and how that indicates like how hard Kniff is squeezing on Raymond's hand and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because I looked at the photo and I'm like, I don't know if I get that from the photo as much as he does.
There is an aggressiveness in the photo still, and he does have this. I did the same thing. I looked it up, like, I don't know, because when you're drawing it, you can accentuate those things. So it's always like after you watch like a biopic, and you're like, how much of that is real, and you have to go search it online.
Yeah.
Same thing. And yeah, there's definitely to me some malice in that photo still, but not as much as in the drawing, I don't think.
Yeah, it's also difficult too because I have such a, like my immediate reaction is always to back Kniff because I like his style more.
Yeah.
I think one of the interesting things about his style is how it came to predominate, a whole era of superhero stuff, but he, drew with all that spare, in my estimation, he drew with all that spare shadow because he was waiting for the color.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
It's like perfect like setup anchor point for all the color that's going to be on there. But then it's interesting that would be a whole basis of a, people will continue that when they're working on black and white books and things like that, to have that whole overemphasized contrasty thing when they don't have the color on top of it,
Yeah, that is interesting. Because I always felt like the only guy that really worked, the only thing that I see Kniff's work kind of really surviving to is through Paul Pope. Because I think there was an era where he was super influential, but like, because when I first discovered Pope, I just felt like his work came out of nowhere.
Right.
Like, and it did. But seeing the Kniff stuff that he was pulling from made so much more sense.
Right. Yeah, no, you're right. It's not a lasting influence now anyway, but I mean,
I wish it was.
Yeah, right. Computer color has changed so much, though. I mean, it seems to me that that's just the predominant influence now is just technical, in the sense that, the line work just matters less and less from a certain perspective.
Yeah, there's a weird thing that happened now where inkers have been replaced with colorists, and there's the vast majority of people that professionally color can't draw, and it makes me worried for the future of humanity. Because it's like, there's like 3 people, I'm not, there's very few people who I would let color my stuff. Like I'm really particular about that.
Right.
But I don't know why I was going into that, but basically I was just like, it's very weird what a gigantic thing, and I'm really harsh with colorists. I like, the other day that I was hanging out with a group of artist friends, and we were all talking about artists whose work they absolutely hate. And I was in a good mood, I think, and I couldn't think of anyone. I was like, everyone's trying. I generally, like, there's people who I don't get along with, but I genuinely, like, think that usually it's hard for me to come up with someone who I have any venom towards just their lines on paper. But I was like, I can name colorists who I remember because I dislike their work. And I think part of it is because it is such a, like, I often go at work looking at it being like, would this be better without color? And then it's hard for me to be nice when I'm just like, someone's job is to make this worse, you know?
Right.
Do you not color your own work? I was always under the impression that because your stuff has such a consistent look and vision, and the colors seem like a particular part of that to me.
Oh yeah, no, I won't work with a colorist.
Okay, that makes sense. I was going to be extremely surprised if someone was coloring your work.
Yeah, actually, I secretly color other people's work sometimes and don't get credit for it.
Awesome.
Because you just enjoy that process, or?
Yeah, I actually took on some jobs recently. I'm doing coloring on a monthly series that isn't announced yet, and then I'm going to be lettering another book. And right now, I've been actually trying to figure out how to make a font out of my handwriting, because I realize that hand lettering someone else's book is just not worth what it would pay.
Yeah, yeah. That's fairly easy, isn't it, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get the kerning and stuff right, it takes a little tweaking. But yeah, there's a program called Font Creator Pro. That's like a $65 program that will, you know, basically walk you through it. And yeah, it's fun.
I've written that down on my desk.
Oh, I'll send you a link.
Okay, yeah, that'd be very helpful.
Yeah, Font Creator is definitely the way to go, and you know, it's fun. It's a lot of fun, but kerning is the real deal breaker.
Yeah, that's what I noticed when I did my I did a free thing just kind of as a test run of it, and yeah, the kerning was horrible.
Yeah, just total deal breaker for me. I mean, I just look at a page and I don't have to read anything. I can just decode the amateurish kerning. It's funny how you just adjust all those things without even thinking. I mean, you don't think about kerning when you're lettering, do you? You just do it, right?
Yeah. And the weird thing is I noticed that my lettering is less consistent than the font stuff I was using, but I think that when you're basically drawing it by hand, you can make it look better by, you know, it doesn't matter if it's that straight across, as long as how the letters all relate to each other is good.
Right.
I wonder if you went to like Comic Craft, if they could make one of your style and then market it, because they have individual people's lettering, like they have a Jim Lee font and a Kubert font. Like the Kubert font's what we used on Strange Death.
Yeah, for years.
And that might be a way to get it made for you and make a profit off of it.
Yeah, that would be interesting, because I know
profit sharing.
I know those guys, and they made a font off my ex-wife did some issues of Elephant Men, so they have a font of hers, so I would use her font constantly. But I feel like when you're no longer married to someone, you probably should stay away from their font.
Yeah.
Get that font out of here.
Yeah. Get out of my house and take your font with you.
I wasn't even thinking about that. Yeah. If you have that connection, that's something, I don't know.
It's very interesting. I was
Who's doing what with the mechs here?
Oh, you guys are already on. I'm on the arm right now.
I'm totally botching this because I'm not looking at anything.
Yeah, this is a very, very different experience, Brendan, than our normal you know, decode the actual lines. It's funny. I felt like he had less to, you know, he's got so much to show us in terms of like individual image composition and page composition and things like that. But I don't think that I really was engaged in the line weight and texture and things like that. It seemed a little more utilitarian to me. But now I'm kind of wishing that I was looking at it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff in there that would be good. Again, to me, a lot of it looks like pulled straight from Otomo's work, and I find a lot of curious things in his work that are things that normally bug me. Things that, like, when I'm doing this right now, I'm trying to avoid, like going in and closing off lines and like just like I'll do it right now, like going back and drawing over a line so it gets kind of clogged up. But Otomo uses that to great effect, really, and I feel like Shirow had some of that as well.
Yeah, I wonder what the overlap with those guys is. There's a weird. It would just remind me. There's a weird there's an incredibly talented guy who does a bunch of adult comics in America who draws in Otomo style. And it's really weird to me because I feel like something that he like it's it's almost the antithesis of everything that he did with his work.
Yeah, that's an interesting specific thing. I'm gonna do adult books, but in this specific style.
Yeah, because I know he like he has a couple sex scenes in his work, but it's not really. There was an interview once where he talked about how if he kind of very cockily says that he was like, people ask me why I don't draw sexy ladies, and he's like, I could if I wanted to. And I remember reading that as a teenager and being like, yeah, this guy could do anything. And now that I'm in my 40s, I'm like, I don't know if he could. I think they would look like architecture,
Yeah. Like a Patrick Nagel, you turn a sexy person into furniture.
Right, exactly. Did you ever hear how Nagel died?
No.
He was at a robocizing event for charity. Seems really on model for him. And he went out afterwards and died in his car.
Wow.
Yeah, that is so like that. They had one of his things like in the window to advertise the event.
Right, probably. And as far as I know, he was heterosexual, which really surprises me with this work.
That surprises you because of the androgyny in his?
I just associate it with nail salons.
Yeah, well, because they always have it in the window, right?
Yeah, it was weird. Friends of mine in animation, not to throw everyone's business in the streets here, but friends of mine in animation would talk about how Don Bluth was openly gay. And that kind of put his work in a really different perspective for me. Because he's an artist who draws very beautiful women.
Oh, yeah.
It's like Space Ace and everything.
Dragon Lair.
Yeah, and it was almost in this thing where like sometimes I feel like gay artists, they draw the type of women where a lot of straight guys can't quite get there because they're too hung up on drawing the boobs,
They can't get the subtle things.
Yeah, but then it also was the thing where I was like, and this is just me being super stereotypical, but I was like, of course he's gay. He put Melanie Griffith as the sex, like, or whoever is it Meg? No, Meg Ryan is in Anastasia.
Oh yeah, that boyish.
And I was like, people that are attracted to women aren't going to be like, yeah, we need to get Meg Ryan as the romantic lead.
She's got that cutesy thing.
Shots fired on Meg Ryan. She's a wonder. I love You've Got Mail. I shouldn't speak ill of her.
I love her in The Doors.
Oh, that's right. She's in that one.
When's the last time she's even been in anything?
She's done enough. She moved on.
Yeah. Shots fired at someone who's no longer working.
But Patrick Nagel is a fun one to copy. I had somebody specifically reference him and ask me to do a bunch of stuff for their boutique 80s vintage shop.
Oh, nice.
And I drew a bunch of 80s semi-celebrities in a budget Nagel style, which is a lot of fun.
That would be fun to try to do a comic in his style.
Oh yeah.
I'm thinking about it. Like, I'm
surprised it doesn't exist, or I'm surprised I haven't seen it.
Not his style exactly, but thinking about it, like the same thing with the Bastien Vives, like that the realism, but the simplicity of line.
Mm-hmm.
And Sean, that one I sent you the couple images of where I'm thinking about doing a story about a woman who's agoraphobic, and so I want, like, anytime she's drawn, it's very closed off. And like, I don't know, his style is like that. Everything's so bounded by line. It seems like it would be a good reference for drawing someone who's agoraphobic. They'd be totally contained like that.
Interesting.
So yeah, he is kind of on my mind. I'm trying to look more at like women's mental health magazine illustration. And see how they handle it, because you get that same type of illustration there. Overly closed off lines. How's everyone feeling about there?
I'm falling apart here. I just don't know what the hell is going on with the rest of the image. I feel like I need to look at it now, and if I do, I might despair.
How's your mech stuff looking down at the bottom there?
like I don't know what's going on. I mean, it's
Let me
like,
scoot it up a little bit. Yeah, I'm having some struggles. I'm really having struggles on like the knee pads and those things. I'm
Oh, I'm glad
copying
you
it.
brought those up because I forgot that's what they were, and I was was going to draw them as part of the robot.
Yeah, I'm just following his form too carefully instead of taking it as a suggestion of a form. You know, I'm actually like, okay, well, that's how he drew the thing. So I think the same thing's gonna happen in the mech. Like I don't have enough of an understanding of. It's so crazy for how I would love to see if there was a process in between.
oh yeah, this is not his pencils. This is his rough. I mean, I think he probably blew up his rough and then reworked it in detail.
It has to be for all that really precise mechanical stuff. There's no way he just freeballed that all with the pen, right?
Right.
Or do we just suck that?
Well, I'm noticing that I'm working fairly differently than you guys because I am actually penciling while I'm inking, which is usually like I generally like rough something out and then I kind of fix it as I'm inking it to kind of correct lines.
So
I'm
you're
wondering if
flipping
that's
back
something.
and forth between the
Yeah.
tools. Okay. It will be interesting because we can't see you now. I'm gonna plop that footage in later to see what that looks like. I wish I could peek right now.
I'm gonna look at the finished image, so I know what's going on, and then I'm gonna pop on the pencil, and then I'm
Oh,
gonna hit
I'm
the
just
timer because I'm hitting up against time,
okay.
and I might have to bow out early. Let's see if I can find this particular image.
I used to love drawing mechs so much too, and now I feel like I cannot access that mindset I was
It
used to
helps
be
me a lot
in.
just to look at 80s Japanese robot drawings.
Right.
Did you ever read that book from Wildstorm called Brass?
Oh
It
yeah,
was
Brass
like
was intense.
mechs gone wild.
It's like a Jeff Darrow style.
Yeah, but then like with Wildstorm cross hatching all over it.
Yeah, it was a lot of the stuff, like a lot of the Wildstorm stuff, I really had to go back and reassess because it's almost like the style ate up like you couldn't tell what was good and bad because it was so stylized. And in later years, I realized like, like Dale Keown, I think was a really fantastic illustrator in those old Pit comics, but it was hard for me to differentiate it from a lot of the other stuff coming
Right.
out.
Yeah, a lot of the image stuff at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's really good. Wildstorm had a lot of, I felt like they were the most, eventually they evolved into being the most fluid with their style. They didn't have so much a house style. You got guys that legitimately developed into their own thing, like Travis Charest and Aaron Weissenfeld now is just a really fantastic painter. You know, he
Oh,
went on
certainly.
to become a fine artist.
Oh yeah.
So I've
What's it?
sorry,
Dan
go ahead.
Panosian's really fascinating because he started. I guess he wasn't Wildstorm, but he started off on Prophet under Liefeld, and now his style is like unrecognizable. And I think he's like fantastic. He's got this like Jack Davis thing to what he does.
Yeah, kind of. What's the other guy that I think of when I see his work? The dude that did Hitman with Garth Ennis, McCrea.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like the way he inks now, where he'll take like big chunks, rectangles. Panosian has that like just piles of rectangles on top of each other thing that's really beautiful.
Yeah, he's fantastic. I kept missing getting him to do a cover for my version of Prophet. I regret that I didn't.
Oh, that would have been such a great callback.
Did you ever did they ever have a collection of the issues that you wrote, Brandon? The arc.
Yeah, there's like 5 trades. I did it for too long.
They did, oh, okay. I didn't know if they were all in print. I mean, I remember reading some of them and seeing a lot of press about it when it was actually coming out on the monthly cycle, but I didn't realize that they had all been collected and they're all still in print right now.
Yeah, the first issue, actually this week, the first issue just went back to print for the 6th printing, which is nice.
Fantastic.
It's such a weird, like I have such, like it's one of my favorite things I've ever gotten to work on was Prophet. Like on my arm, me and all the guys that worked on it all got matching Prophet tattoos. Like we were like the cast Lord of the Rings or something. But it was weird because you know I never owned the thing, even though I worked on it for 5 years.
Right.
And it was funny because the publisher of Image will constantly be like, we kind of regret that you didn't just do your own thing, but I feel like it wouldn't have been as fun or as weird if it wasn't based off the Liefeld comic.
Right. You get a kind of like conceptual friction from the get-go.
Yeah, well, I had such a bad relationship with Liefeld comics in the 90s. Like I didn't like them, and then I felt like being able to work on his stuff kind of like allowed me to appreciate it in a way that I never understood. And I got to really like him as a person, which was
Right.
I didn't expect to, which is
Right.
sounds bad, but
Yeah.
and I remember thinking like that I really started to admire that, you know, his name for a while just became synonymous with bad drawing.
Right.
And I really admired that he didn't stop drawing, you know.
Right.
And I was like, if everyone hates you and complains about you and you still like just make your work because you like drawing, like that's really admirable.
And maintain the style that is getting shit on.
Well,
Yeah,
while
totally.
while improving too, and personal improvement, and I think it's worth remembering how young he was too.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, and weird having that level of like fame thrown at you through art, and you know, relatively sane for
Right.
the life that he lived in comics.
Yeah, I
God
loved
forbid
his
anything-
stuff.
God forbid anything I did when I was 19 years old was accessible to anybody in the public now, you know?
Oh yeah, actually, I was talking to someone yesterday about how I refused to reprint the comic I did when I was 19.
Nah, you just gotta let those words hang out there. It's like it's so important, I think, to anyone else coming up to have those documents.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag, I think, because it's really important to me to not sell anything that I wouldn't buy myself.
Mm,
You know, and so on that level, I have to be like, this isn't worth the cover price.
Right.
gotcha. Yeah, I would just think about it as like documentation that people would buy for, like, you know, we're sitting here nerding out like, oh my God, we have a book of his pencils or his roughs, you know. I'm sure there's people out there who would be like, man, I'd love to see the developmental phases.
Yeah, I definitely do think there's some value in that, and it's funny because I would love to see Shirow's early fan comics that he did.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So
Have
in
you
that
read
sense,
Black
you know, I
Magic?
think, say that again.
Have you read Black Magic, Brandon?
Oh yeah, yeah. That's a weird one.
Yeah.
Although I will say that I think Black Magic is the best non-comics thing. That the animated version of it is the closest thing to his work that exists in not comics, I think. Because I'm really critical of all the film and animation adaptations of his work, because
Right.
Ghost in the Shell is a very big deal with a lot of people, and I just don't think it's that good compared to, I mean, I don't even think the Ghost in the Shell comics is that good compared to Appleseed. It's obviously very beautifully done, but it feels kind of like lesser Appleseed a lot of times because it
Yeah.
has like very similar main characters and kind of a less unique world.
Right.
Did you
But-
see the live action?
Oh yeah, yeah, and it was just, I mean, it was mostly just boring.
Dude, that was the most beautiful movie I've ever fallen asleep during. I just fell asleep during that movie so hard.
Yeah, it's funny. A friend of mine did designs in it. Do you know Jim Mahfoud's work?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
got to actually work on it, which I was jealous of. But then he took all of his friends and family to go see the movie, being like, "I did drawings in this," and he said it was so dark and there's so much stuff going on that he couldn't even tell what was taken from his drawings and what wasn't.
Yeah, it was rough.
Yeah,
That was a rough film.
Are all of the adaptations so humorless?
That's generally what I feel like they are.
These comics are so I mean, I mean, not that it's like a comedy or something, but they're so funny. It's so weird that that's something that people would shy away from. I mean, the first adaptation, the one that gets all the, the critical acclaim or whatever, is just, I mean, it's sad, miserable.
Yeah, and that one's kind of funny too because I revisited it like I don't know 6 years ago, and it has this reputation as like it's this like existential like plunging of the depths of the human soul, but it's just like the amount of like slow motion breast heaving in it really like undercuts that in a really cartoonish way. Where like I think there are different motivations going on in this, and the animators had different motivations than the writers.
Yeah, I never found that movie particularly deep. I mean, I watched it when maybe I was too young to pick up on that kind of stuff, but I just
Yeah,
thought it was kind of a baffling story.
I feel like if people who are able to quote Plato probably won't get much out of the Ghost in the Shell animated film.
Yeah, but I hadn't, I was probably like 16 or something at that. Like
Sure.
I'd never even read Plato at that point. So yeah, that is, yeah.
Yeah, there's some comic versions of Appleseed not done by Shirow too.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, there's one by the guy that did Sexy Voice and Robo, which is
Wow.
very weird. And then there's another one that I haven't actually seen a copy of that just feels more like it's based off the CGI animated things.
Wait, they're comics based on the movies that were based on the comics?
I think so, yeah. Because there's a lot of
Yeah,
that for Ghost in the Shell.
weird. And they're not by Shiro.
Yeah.
No.
Huh. Yeah, he's just
Or-
cashing in.
As far as I can tell, he has spent 20 years enjoying himself. It doesn't seem like he's really done. He's credited with design work for a bunch of stuff, but it looks to me like a lot of it was done, like basically based on pitches that he made decades before.
Hey, if you can cash in like that.
Oh yeah, I'm not. I don't begrudge him or anyone. People get to live the life they want to live.
Yeah, it's frustrating though because he's such a kind of unique storyteller that he kind of stopped telling stories. Kind of a letdown.
If you got like, I could retire now, fuck you, lottery winnings, would you keep working?
Oh yeah, I have the Robert Crumb thing where it's like sanity, you know.
Okay.
I needed to process stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And I took about at one point I stopped kind of working regularly for about 2 years, and I was mostly miserable.
It's a good thing to realize about oneself.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to have something to push against.
Yeah. I've always thought that like real artists are using their art to, and when we were talking to Eddie Campbell the other day, this came up, that people who really like stick with it in the arts have something about reality, and it doesn't necessarily have to be something negative. Oftentimes I think it is, but something about reality that they're trying to grapple with, that they're trying to solve, and the art is the way they do that. And I've always wondered and always kind of hoped that like whatever I'm grappling with, I get to the point where I've solved it, and then like what happens at that point? Can one walk away? Is that even possible?
I mean, I think a big part of it is it becomes your identity after a while too. So it's like, how do you walk away from, who you are?
Yeah,
Your friends,
I guess.
people how the people perceive you, social structure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I guess
right.
because of the teaching, I have that like it's related to art, but it's a job and an identity I can walk into. But it's also hard to imagine not being creative in some capacity. Like I realized one of the reasons that I'm doing this, like, started doing this channel is like this is now a creative venture. I don't have time to sit around and make a new book, but I'm kind of finding ways to produce things and put them out there still. It is a kind of weird sickness.
But a lot of it's just figuring out how to deal with the identity of an artist in the world and everything. I always feel like I had all these tools from reading a bunch of comic books, and then I became an adult, and suddenly the only tools that I have to grapple with are all these like standard adult problems, or like, you know, from Appleseed, and trying to use things like Appleseed and, you know, and Mobius comics to deal with real life problems. Which maybe aren't the best tools, but it's, you know, it's interesting that the attempt is even interesting to me.
But it's working so far, you feel?
Yeah, I mean, to whatever whatever ability. Yeah, I think it's, I like, I mean, something I got out of that Rain Like Hammers book was it was the first kind of long comic I'd done in a couple of years, and I reminded myself that I really like making comics more than anything else.
Because you hadn't made anything for a while.
Yeah,
or
I
at least
did.
a lengthy series.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I was doing a lot of work. I tried to do it. I should send it to you guys. I did a TV pilot.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah, I'd love to see that.
It's a very weird setup because I did it with entirely porn cast and actors.
Wow.
But it's just a science fiction. It's basically like kind of Red Dwarf style science fiction comedy.
Awesome.
So live action.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, actually, it's live action characters, but then every time we had to do spaceships or anything like big exterior shots, we had basically one set. So anything outside of that one set, we animated.
Awesome.
Yeah,
send that over.
Yeah. I'm going to be doing a Kickstarter for an old adult comic I recolored, and I'm going to be making that because I always felt like Kickstarters were kind of weird in that they oftentimes will be like, you know, $10 and you get the PDF version of it. And I totally understand that, but I wanted to also, I was like, also I have this pilot I can't sell, so it'll be $10 for, you know, or $5 or whatever for the PDF and this weird pilot no one's seen before.
Yeah, digital extras is an easy way to, I mean, we've learned that it's an easy way to help monetize the thing.
Yeah, totally. And it's also kind of cool to be like, what would be really fun if I like this person's work? What would be a fun version of it that I could get?
Yeah, like you want those extras that are unseen.
Like I always think about artists I like. For a while I was trying to push Image on the idea of basically making like an interview magazine for different artists, because oftentimes, like, you know, if somebody took a photograph of like Shirow's desk that he worked at, it would be so exciting to me.
Right.
So I'd love it if there was like a, you know, and it's interesting because I always go back to Dave Sim obviously when I talk to you guys, but like his kind of image of himself, the way he kind of cultivated in the 80s, I wonder how much of that was controlled, because everything, whenever he'd show any place that he worked at, it would always look like it looked like he was at the Regency.
If you go back through, like when I had the first 5 or 6 volumes of Cerebus that I bought physical, and then I went into college and I didn't have money, and so I just torrented it, you know. Sure. And so when I've read Cerebus, it's always included all of the letter columns and the ads and stuff like that. And I did a big reread, and I wrote I did essays for that, amomentofcerebus.com. And one of the big things I came away from that reread with is that Dave was kind of play act, and I don't know, but it's what it looked like to me. Is there was a theme for each volume and a type of personality that he inhabited, and the changes are very quick. Like now we're in this story, all of a sudden all the pictures of Dave are very lonely and solemn, and then we change to this story and it's more thematic on like communism, and so all of a sudden we're doing like the Spirits of the Independence tour, which is like, you know, everyone coming together. And making this tour happen. And so the way he was conducting himself outside of the work, the way the ads were constructed and everything seems keyed to the theme of the particular volume he's working on.
Okay,
So
that's
I think your sense is probably correct that there was a lot of image, like manipulating his image for certain purposes. And I think my speculation is Cerebus, I mean, he's always said that Cerebus was his search for truth.
Mhm.
And I think the way he would test things is this is again all speculation, and it has nothing to do with having worked with him. It has entirely to do with just reading the work and all of that, is that the best thing he could think of to test his theories about truth was like throw them out there and see how people interacted with them. And so when you get that wild reaction against some of the theories he was testing, that gave him some information that he started making decisions based upon.
It's like playing Battleship, intellectual Battleship.
Yeah, exactly. And when the feminism thing hit, it kind of gave him some kind of information that then he made a calculation based on. And then he leaned into that, and the reaction backwards just further solidified the view, and it became this like cyclical thing. To me, that's what Cerebus is. It's this record of someone like using a book to test public reaction. And he talks about that in Reads extensively, right? The idea of cleaving.
Oh, right. Yeah, that is a fascinating, and yeah, it's I don't know. Cerebus is a weird. It's hard to not. It's a hard book to talk to people about because its reputation and the reality of reading it are not the same animal.
Right.
Yeah.
People, you don't recognize it. If I hear somebody describe it, it doesn't jibe with my.
Yeah, and as a cartoonist, it's really hard to hear people be dismissive of something so ambitious.
Oh yeah, it's a monumental achievement. I mean, it's basically unprecedented.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
yeah,
and I think. Sorry, go ahead.
I don't know what were you saying.
No, I'll save it.
I was just gonna say, where was I going with that? I don't know. It's I think I hit that a lot. Like I try to get more respect for people that do things that I can't do. It was very easy to like complain about like a guy like Alex Ross when I was younger, and then I reached a point where I realized like I can't do what he does. I better shut up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just yeah, in general, that kind of thing. There's a story that friends of mine would pass around about a local group of cartoonists all complaining about Habibi, and it made me so mad because I was like, I can't do Habibi, and I know they sure as shit can't.
Right.
You know. But I think sometimes it's very easy to critique something, and I think that's and if I'm going to get a little larger critique of society, I think the comics community kind of not caring about craft, but caring about kind of, you know, like I feel like there's a value in just someone making something that is beautiful and that is, you know, an insane amount of work. And I just it's very frustrating to me because I don't see anyone value that. And maybe it's something where you can't understand it unless you've done something
Right.
where you know how hard it is to draw a single page. So a million pages is like, you know, maddening to you.
When you get to the point where you can see the sweat in the line, you know, and you get an idea of exactly what it took to do that. Yeah, and Craig, I never met him. I shouldn't call him Craig, but Mr. Thompson's stuff is just so fantastically sophisticated in terms of his rendering and his panel usage, and you know, he's just like a humanitarian in my estimation. I mean, his search for inner truth, the way that he lets everybody in his stories be individuals. I mean, I think he's incredible, and that was just like such a weird public flogging that book received.
Yeah, and I feel like that was the line in the sand for me, where I realized like, oh, if Craig's not good enough for people, then it's not about being good enough. It's
Right.
it's just about them wanting to flog people.
Right.
Yeah, and there's so the thing I was going to say about Dave is I don't think it's just recognizing his monumental achievement as a cartoonist. It's, to me, it's the only thing I can think of that is a public search for truth done 1 month at a time in the public eye, interacting with the public and just letting that hang out. Like the risk that it takes to say, I'm going to search for truth and you're all going to be privy to it as I go and as I adjust. I can't think of any other, in a single project. There may be authors who have done that throughout their career through multiple books or something, but contained in one single thing that you can read from front to end and watch someone's progression. And then if you don't like where he wound up, why would you dismiss that instead of say, this is a record of how someone gets there?
Yeah,
And we should be
really
studying this like as a fascinating artifact of a philosophical development. I don't know. To me, it just seems like it should be looked at for all of those reasons.
right. But I think if you dismiss, or if you are able to just be like, he's a misogynist, I dismiss it, then you don't have to engage with it.
Yeah, but you're not seeing that view that you see as misogynistic happened over halfway through the thing, and there was you know, a large period beforehand where he was of the entirely opposite kind of world view from where he's wound up now.
Right.
You know, like a hedonistic, you know, atheistic. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like,
Well,
sex, drugs, rock and roll, free love, like.
Right. He had a mesh shirt.
Yeah.
A nipple ring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To take it back to Habibi, you know, the service connection for me is just the violated audience expectations. You know, he followed up in the insanely popular Blankets with a story that's just completely different in terms of the tone and tenor, and I think that audience expectations being violated is sort of a third rail of public creative work that's sort of under discussed.
Oh yeah, that is interesting. But I wonder what he could have done. Yeah, I wonder if it would have been limiting to not violate audience expectations. Because there's lots of like very
limiting.
What's that?
It's always going to be limiting. Like you can only do the same thing over and over.
Yeah, because there's lots of like safe cartoonists that nobody is mad about, but I don't know if they actually feel that passionately about them either.
Right.
Yeah, it's predictable. I mean, I feel like cartoonists we're lucky compared to like musicians. Like you can't really go too far afield at like especially a band. You can't be Metallica and then go record, you know, a Miles Davis album.
Sure.
There's some people, yeah, well, I mean a little bit, but there's some people who pull that off, but very few. And I feel like cartoonists can do that. I mean, most of them don't, but I feel like there's a little bit more possibility for that. And I'm always sad when I see people not do that, like especially the best, you know, the people that I think are the best. I think I saw Alan Moore complain about it with Chris Ware a long time ago. He's like, you're so good, but you just do the same depressed story over and over.
Yeah, Ware's really fascinating me because I see the skill in his work, but I don't, it doesn't connect it with my life at all. And maybe it's just that maybe that's an advantage of comic books in general too, is you can, you know, if you make a movie, it's got to connect with enough people to fund the thing. But with comics, you could make something where it just connects with like 5,000 people on the planet that read comics, and it's a win.
What the violating audience expectation thing, I think that people suffer in proportion with their popularity, and that basically the bigger you are, the worse it is for you to do it.
Oh yeah, very, very much so. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to retire mine where it is right now because I have to.
Yeah, let's see it. Can you pull it back a little bit? I'm almost done. How's yours going, Brandon?
I'm on to the robot part. I don't know if you guys can see this on the screen.
Oh yeah, you've preserved you've got such better line work.
I was cheating and looking at his inks.
Oh, okay.
Mine does barely counts. Both of yours look great.
I'm gonna have to say goodbye right now, guys, and let you guys wrap up however you want to. But Brandon, fantastic to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you as well. It's been great talking.
And
Yeah, have a good one, Sean. I'm probably gonna. I think I'm almost done here, anyways. And I've definitely got like when I went out from the other recording and I said, no, we got to go do the drawing part still. It was like, what? So I should probably wrap up soon too. Okay. Yeah, I feel like this mecha stuff here really threw me for a loop. Is that making more sense while you're looking at the?
No. It's a weird. Maybe if I was looking at the other panels around it, but. Yeah, and also my recording keeps going off and on, so I hope that it'll be somewhat useful, hopefully.
Oh, you've got a
yeah, I've just got like a
regular
camera.
DSLR camera. Yeah, those have a 20-minute time limit.
Yeah, so
that's one of the things that we found out on this channel is the webcams don't get the best quality. The DSLR gets good quality, but you got a 20-minute time limit, and the reason for that is if it records more than 20 minutes for tax purposes, it's considered a camcorder, and the companies that manufacture them have to pay higher taxes on the imports or exports or something. So
that's very specific.
Yeah, it's so stupid. So they purposely set that limit, and that's why your camera's turning off. It's very
interesting. Good to know, though.
Yeah. Useless facts that you learn when you're trying to make a YouTube channel.
Certainly. Do you feel like this whole process is changing your, like, are you learning a lot about art in making this YouTube channel?
I think, yeah. I mean, there's certain things. I haven't done enough of my own stuff outside of this. You know, I haven't had the time to see if it manifests in my own work. I think a lot of it so far has just been spent figuring out how to make all of the technical aspect of it work. So I feel like I'm learning some more about tax codes on cameras.
That makes sense.
We'll see though. I don't know.
I got a ton out of when I read through all the Tintin stuff. I feel like it like dramatically affected how I drew comics afterwards.
On the read through is you're looking at the asterisk stuff, is that?
Yeah. I'm almost less invested right now because I think at the other time it was like when I was doing Tintin, it was like, you know, just like the pandemic was starting and I felt like I didn't really know what to do with Instagram.
Okay. Yeah.
You know.
So you did like a straight read through of Tintin.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm surprised, but that seems like that's something that's been an influence in your work from the get-go.
Yeah, very much, but I don't think I realized how much of an influence because I hadn't read it in years.
Okay.
You know,
what was it?
What's it?
What was it specifically that you feel like has imported now that you really looked at it?
Just a lot of really cool stuff about how he would use these tricks just to kind of keep a complicated story going by adding little like slapstick tricks in the middle of it, and just like how everything was so simple. Like he does a thing that I think of as like a very classic European panel where he would just have the character standing directly on the panel border.
Oh yeah.
So you don't really have to figure out the perspective like you would, you know, if it was reality. And that was like, it's nice sometimes to have that option to be like, I don't want to, you know, it's like a new kind of clear tool just to start a scene with.
Yeah, see, that's the other thing that I think, and that's why when we're talking about doing like a more formalist focused aspect of this channel, I feel like that's where I would have more to learn. You know, it's a little hard to just like trace one person's panel, and it's especially in the way that we're doing it, where it's usually like pre-inked. And so we're just re-inking it, which is what I was doing on the Raymond book, right? I was just like trying to recreate the work for print. And I learned a lot, but I feel like you have to do that a bunch of times for one artist for it to really seep into you.
Sure.
Like we can't just do one Barry Windsor Smith drawing and then say like it's affected my art. And it's pretty superficial way of looking at art anyways, right? Like just this surface level. How does he pull off that ink line?
Yeah, but I mean, there's something there too, because it's like you can at least be like, this is like, at least you know like what it takes to pull off a Barry Windsor Smith ink line now.
Yeah, and I think if I did like 10 of them, then I could probably pretty easily start going and making like Barry Windsor Smith-esque stuff. That's something I'm really interested in is switching styles all the time. It's something that, to me, that's a formal trick, right? It's something that I would talk about if I talk about formalisms, is style as symbol.
Yeah,
So that is maybe what drove this idea. Well, actually, Sean's idea was to do it was his idea to do the recreations, but
nice. Yeah, I like it.
It's a way I work already in trying to like 8 people styles. I've always done that. Because like you can just import everything that everyone knows about Masamune Shirow if you draw in his style.
Right.
And that's a lot. Like you're saying that there was a guy that's doing the like Akira style porn.
Yeah.
There's something about that automatically has meaning embedded in it. And I like that.
It's weird too, because it also feels like when you're on that, and that guy has his own style, but it's always fascinating with artists that draw so closely to other artists. Because I always feel like the goal is to almost take something of someone else and then make it yours. And it's weird too, because my work oftentimes gets very compared to Mobius.
Yeah, for sure.
A huge influence of mine, but it's always like, on some levels it frustrates me because I will look at a Mobius book and sometimes I'm like, I wish it looked like that, you know?
Yeah, but yours has this other filter on it that's for sure, like I've always associated it with graffiti art.
Oh, sure.
Like that kind of, or what was like Stussy, even like the characters that I saw in the Stussy clothes in the 90s and stuff, and then
right.
mixed up with Mobius. Like you've processed it and spit it back out into something. Like everyone knows if you see one of your drawings, they know it's yours, right?
Yeah, I don't get mistaken for Mobius actually, so that's good.
Yeah, and you don't get mistaken for anyone else. And if someone got too close to your work, then they would say, well, you're aping Brandon Graham.
I've had that happen, which is hilarious to me. I had somebody message me on a drawing I posted and they're like, oh, I can see the Brandon Graham influence. I wrote it back. I was like, oh yeah, that is me. And he's like, oh my God, I didn't realize.
It'll be fun when you start getting people sending you things that aren't yours.
Oh yeah, I wonder. There was a picture that kept circulating for a while that would always get me really irritated because it was clearly not Mobius drawing that people would always credit to Mobius.
Is it one that like I would be familiar with if I saw it?
Probably not. It's not particularly. It's just like was a woman like in a spacesuit looking up. It was a very kind of Mobius-ish thing, but not him.
But you could tell immediately it wasn't him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that like, but for me, it's interesting to actually nail the style as close as possible and use that to say something. So that's something I often get myself into. So I think that just predilection is there in what we're doing here. And it would be interesting to take those more sophisticated. I mean, when I'm doing that too, I'm looking at how they structure their page and all that kind of stuff. There's a book I did just for myself where I was making fun of Grant Morrison's run on Batman, the first Batman RIP. And I did each page in the style of different artists and try to ape their style, their storytelling.
Oh, cool. What artist did you go with?
Oh God, it was one per page. So it was Chris Burnham on page 1. God, who else in there? There's Chris Ware. I tried to stick with Batman artists, but I can't help myself. I like Chris Ware so much. I always have to try.
Just a bunch of Chris's.
Uh,
Morrison's one of those guys. I've never met him, so I always ask people when I meet them questions about what he's like.
Oh, Grant Morrison. Yeah. What's the answers that you get?
I know he does a lot of his communication through his wife. So like Chris
Okay.
Burnham was telling me that he would just call her up and she would tell him like, oh yeah, Grant's got like page 3 done, but not page 1 of this script. So here's this. So it's kind of lots
That
of
would
like
be
that.
irritating.
Yeah. I just met a photographer who was friends with Morrison, and he was telling me that he went and stayed with him in Glasgow, and he his routine was that he would come have a cup of coffee with him, and then he would get up and get a bowl of potato chips and a pint of cider and go up to a studio to write at like 10 in the morning.
Every day, potato chips and cider.
Apparently, I mean, maybe he's trying to impress this guy.
Yeah, I think at a certain point you have like an obligation to be an eccentric.
Yeah,
when you
well,
get a
that was my
certain
wonder with
reputation.
Morrison always is like how much, because I know that he's got an act that he puts on.
Him more than anyone, as far as I can tell. Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like Alan Moore is really that. For whatever
Yeah,
that's
that's
worth.
my sensibility, my impressions. I don't know. I just felt like sometimes that shows up in Morrison's writing too, where it's like purposely weird and kind of obstructionist.
Yeah, and it's frustrating because he's clearly incredibly talented, and so when he does something where you're like, you're just trying to be a weird wizard with this, it feels a little like unnecessary.
Yeah, so that's what I was poking fun at in this parody. I don't know why I did it. I just did it for myself. And I was poking fun at just like purposely leaning into the weirdness of it and then purposely leaning into the meta stuff, you know.
Sure.
And like the kind of things that I saw, formalisms that he was trying to pull off, but I thought they could be done. Like one thing I noticed in his run that he had a bunch of characters in a museum and there was pop art around and there was the balloons in the pop art. And so that could become part of like what the characters were saying. But as
Okay.
far as I could tell, the word balloons in the pop art didn't really add anything to the story. You know, like there could be like you could create confusion about what the balloons were doing, right?
Sure.
Like about whose head it was pointing to. So there was things like that that I thought, oh man, you're missing opportunities, and I wanted to like try to pull that off and stuff. So that's part of what I was doing too.
Yeah, that's fair. Oh, I just did a weird crosshatch on this. I will forgive myself.
Let me see.
Let's see if you can see this. I just did this.
Oh no, that looks good on the leg. I wish I'd have done better. I'm going crazy now. I'm just like filling up the background.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I almost never do cross hatching, so it's one of those things. Like, I guess I'll do it here. He's doing it, but there's this kind of angled cross hatching that him and I know Adam Warren does that are it's kind of like, you know, it's like creates these diamond shapes rather than squares. And I should have done that, but I went more Gerhard.
It's like this, and then you go just at like
exactly
5 degrees off. Yeah, that's a super manga thing. I've done plenty of cross hatching lately.
Oh Jesus, yeah.
Yeah, it's so automatic. I mean, I've always drawn that way. So
I had a friend who hated cross lines. It's one of the artists that was most influential on me. He was a graffiti writer from Seattle who he did a couple comics, but hasn't never did enough to have a bunch of books out. And he hated lines crossing. Like he would avoid it at any cost.
Like it just visually irritated him.
Yeah, like I remember hearing there's a cartoon, like a Jackie Chan cartoon, and I remember hearing the character designer on that hated parallel lines, which really confused me because I was like, those just exist in reality.
Yeah, how do you avoid that?
Yeah, and why would you want to?
Yeah, that's odd. I don't know. People have their sensibilities. All right, I think I'm pretty much done here. My cross hatching is gonna take over.
Okay.
And
I've got
it is
last leg to do here. I'm on the last leg of the last leg.
All right, so I'm gonna tap out because I gotta go have family dinner now.
Okay.
Thanks so much for joining us, man. This has been a blast, and
Yeah, this is
I
really
really
fun.
do. I would really love to start figuring out how to get like a weekly shorter episode of formalist tricks.
Yeah, we could easily just jump on there and just talk about what we're reading and
Yeah.
talk things through and not make it a big event if we want to cut down on time.
Yeah, and so I'll work with Sean on that.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
go
we
ahead
can
and finish
do.
up.
What's that?
I was gonna say, go ahead and finish up filming your drawing, and we'll just tag that on the end of this.
Okay, excellent.
We'll just let you talk to yourself.
Yeah, I mean,
what were you gonna say there at the end?
I was gonna say we could even do a thing where we went through like we could go slower through the rest of Appleseed if you want to just do like 20 pages at a time and talk through them.
Oh yeah, I think there's so many books and so many like that.
Have you read Orion yet?
No, I need to get a hold of that.
That is like his, I think, most impressive like technical book.
Okay, and Sean's been having me look at Tezuka's Phoenix,
Okay.
and that is like every page is just some fascinating trick. So that's another one I could do 10 pages at a time or one
Oh,
page.
nice. I've only read a tiny chunk of that. Have I told you I have a Tezuka original here?
Oh my God, no.
It's just a sketch, but just that I managed to get a Tezuka sketch is bizarre to me.
Any of the manga. Another thing we're finding doing this channel is that they don't really sell their original art, and so you can't find images of it.
I've seen so few manga original like in person.
Yeah, so that even in and of itself should make that thing. That's so desirable. That's crazy.
Yeah, as soon as I got it, a friend of mine is married to a Japanese woman, and she was like, he should give it to me. An American shouldn't have that. And I was like, I'm gonna be buried with this. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's mine now, bitch.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, but well, thanks so much. We really appreciate it. This is awesome. And go ahead and finish yours up, and we'll let that run at the end of the video. And then if you can scan it and send it, we'll put all four up on the screen as a comparison.
Okay, excellent.
To his finished inks, and then the.
So do you want to leave your Zoom thing on, or should I just, because I can keep just recording mine and leave it as, and we can just put music over or whatever.
Yeah, just keep recording the video, and
okay.
We'll sort it out from there.
That sounds
all
perfect.
Right. Thanks so much. Have fun finishing that up.
Yeah. Have a good day. It was good talking to you.
Thanks. Later.
All right, later.